vulnerable, the church in the public square. Tonight we will learn about the issues the church will address in Annapolis during the 2016 legislative session, and we will learn how we all can remain informed and involved in advocating for the less fortunate and vulnerable in our society. Mary Ellen is Executive Director of the Maryland Catholic Conference, which represents the public policy interests of the Catholic Diocese that serves Maryland. Mrs. Russell is a member of the Executive Committee of the National Association of State Catholic Conference Directors. She is a past member of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Ad Hoc Committee on Religious Liberty. Time will not allow for me to talk about all of our activities and membership, but before we do, I'd like to have Father Larry come up and say a prayer and start the meeting.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. This is based on Pope Francis's prayer for the year, the Holy Year. Loving God, help us live out in our daily lives the mercy which you constantly extend to all of us. As you cast open the doors of your heart to us, may we respond with urgency to proclaim your mercy to others. May we always be credible witnesses of mercy, professing it and living it as the core of the revelation of Jesus Christ. May we never tire of extending mercy and be ever patient in offering compassion and comfort. May we become the voice of every man and woman and repeat confidently without end these words from Psalm 25. Be merciful, be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and your steadfast love, for they have been from of old. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome me, please join me in welcoming Mary Ellen Russell. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. I said to Jeanette, it's so nice to actually speak at a podium that I can see over. Usually I'm not here. This is great. And I really want to thank Jeanette. She has been so lovely to me, inviting me here and emailing me, continually making sure I have everything I need, a phone number, where I'm going and everything. So it was a really, really warm welcome. It's just been delightful, and I really appreciate it. And I just want to say it's so impressive and just touching to me to see so many of you out here on a cold, what day is it today, Wednesday? Wednesday night with snow in the air and on its way. I mean, I'm much more accustomed to coming to these things and 10 people will be here and we'll have a nice little chat. So it's really very impressive. I think it really speaks to the spirit of this parish and to the wonderful organizing that Jeanette does. So that's very great. So what I'd like to do tonight is talk about three different areas. I first just want to explain the Maryland Catholic Conference to everybody, because I think it's a little confusing about what exactly it is that we do and who we are. And then speak to our theme about the Year of Mercy in terms of how that connects to the vision of what ties together all of the issues that the church works on in the public square, and how I think that this theme is just so fitting for how we see our work and how we see the reason why we advocate for all the things we do, and to kind of touch on the fact that we do deal with so many very different issues that seem to some people, particularly if you think of it in terms of politics, to be almost contradictory, if you will. I want to kind of touch on that. What is it that ties the church's issues together in spite of, the divides that we see in terms of partisan politics. And then certainly I wanted to talk to you about some of the issues that are coming up during the session this year. There's a lot of very urgent issues, and it's a really welcome opportunity to be able to talk to people about some very important things that are going on. So So let me just start with the kind of boring stuff, but, excuse me, just the structure of the conference, just so you kind of understand how we operate. As Jeanette mentioned, the Catholic Conference is one of maybe 42 similar organizations and states around the country, and we're all organized to represent the varying dioceses that actually are located or have territory within the state of Maryland. So we represent, of course, the Archdiocese of Baltimore that we all belong to, as well as the Archdiocese of Washington, which includes Southern Maryland, Prince George's, and Montgomery County, and the Diocese of Wilmington, which includes the Eastern Shore. So if a Catholic diocese has territory in the state of Maryland, we represent them. We don't do anything, thank God, in the District of Columbia, which is also part of the Archdiocese of Washington, and we don't do anything in the state of Delaware. The Diocese of Wilmington is primarily located. So our Board of Governors, our bosses, are the bishops of those three dioceses. So Archbishop Laurie is the chairman of the Catholic Conference of our Board of Governors, and he's a very, very wonderful person to work with. I think he really should get a lobbying badge, because he loves to come to Annapolis and loves to relate to legislators. He's been tremendously helpful in helping us build relationships and get votes when we need votes, so he's been really great. And then we also have an administrative board, and that's a board of representatives. Do you mind if I just move this a bit? Sure. It's a board of about 5 representatives from each of those 3 dioceses, and those are lay professionals, some clergy, some people from the diocese, like the 3 heads of the Catholic Charities for the 3 dioceses are on our board, former legislators, we have former judges, people who get politics and get the church and can really help and advise us on the issues that we're working on. And we meet together with the Board of Governors and Administrative Board twice a year, and usually in the fall before the session to kind of go over what we think is coming up and have them approve our legislative agenda, and then again in the spring to kind of go over what happened. And also, talk about mutual interests among the dioceses. We sort of start a lot of mutual projects through the Catholic Conference, just because we're the gathering place for the Catholic Church in the state. So often a lot of people ask about how do you decide the issues that you're going to work on, and that's the process. We have, we're divided by what we call 3 departments and issue areas. So we have a Respect for Life department, or committee, if you will. We have education, children and families, and economic and social justice are the 3 issue areas. And we have a lobbyist attached to each of those issue areas. 3 wonderful, young, bright people. I'm just blessed to have absolutely fantastic staff working on the issues. They meet 3 or 4 times a year, again, with their representatives from the dioceses, and that's when they come up with a sort of proposed agenda to bring to the bishops, and then we meet with the bishops and have that agenda approved. And the people on those departments are usually people from the diocese, like the education department includes the 3 Catholic school superintendents. Respect for Life includes the 3 Respect for Life coordinators for the diocese. So there's a fair amount of vetting and input and process that goes on to get us to the point where we have a legislative agenda. That all then goes out the window when the session starts, because bills come up that we weren't expecting. So I'm fooling to a certain extent. We plan as much as we can, but a lot of what we deal with is just sort of dealing with the unexpected that arises during the legislative session. We also have a communications director and an outreach and advocacy coordinator. So that's a very, very big part of what we do. We've got a website, Facebook, Twitter, every possible way we can think of to communicate with people and really try to get the word out about what the church is doing when it comes to public policy issues. So one of the very, very important takeaways I hope you will all leave with, if you're not already doing this, is that we have a very important email network. And I have sign-up sheets back there that you can take home with you. You can go online and sign up. Any of you signed up? It's our Catholic Advocacy Network. So you get emails and can write to legislators. So hopefully everybody in this room, is very, very easy. Would you all attest to that? It's very easy to follow. The way the Catholic Online Advocacy Network operates is especially during the legislative session, we'll send you an email. And sometimes you may be getting a little bombarded, but we really try to respect your time. And it'll just be a paragraph saying this or that issue is before the legislature. Here's what happened. Here's what's happening with it. And then we'll draft a little message for you to send your legislators. And all you have to do is push a button, and it goes off to the right people. So we're very cognizant of the fact that people are way too busy to deal with the kind of stuff that we're dealing with on a regular basis. Most people probably don't even know who their state senator and delegates are. They might know who their congressperson is, but they don't know what legislative district they're in. This is in District 7, by the way, the state legislative district. So what the system does is it automatically goes to the right person. And they're hearing from their own constituents. And that's very, very effective for legislators. They really care about the fact that somebody who 4 years from now is going to see their name on a ballot and decide whether or not to vote for them again, now is writing to them, now knows their name, now knows their email address, and now knows what they're up to down in Annapolis. So it's a very effective tool, and I really ask you to spread the word about it because it's just a very easy way to find out what's going on. You don't ever have, you don't like the issue, don't send an email. You don't have to, but at least it gives you some sense of what's happening, and then a way to influence your legislators by writing them and taking action on a particular issue. So that's one thing I brought for you back there. I want to make sure you're aware of. Another thing that we started doing through the work of our outreach coordinator is a project called the District Captain Project and Parish Point of Contact Project. So we've been, and I don't know whether St. Stephen's, I should check to see if St. Stephen's has a parish point of contact yet, but we've been bothering our poor pastors, where's our pastor asking, did you assign a parish point of contact yet?
I think I did.
Okay.
I don't remember what I've done, but I think we did.
Okay, all right, great. I'm sure you probably did. But, not rocket science, but we're basically asking every pastor to give us a name of somebody who we can keep in touch with, honestly, so that we don't have to bother them. Our pastors are so overburdened with so much email and so much work and so many demands on their time that if we just have one person who can, quietly just pull on their shoulder and say, did you see that bulletin insert that they asked us to put in, or that little tiny bulletin notice that we put in the bulletin, somebody to kind of dog our issues for us. I think it really, really helps us. And then at the other level, we're also trying to appoint for each district, where say there's 3 or 4 parishes in District 7, a district captain. And that's somebody that we actually pay a small stipend to, $1,000 a year, to just help kind of keep everybody in the district kind of coordinated and help starting to build relationships between the Catholic community and the legislators that represent you. So there's a lot of information about that on our website. We've been trying to recruit young adults in particular for younger people who are interested in politics. It's a great resume builder to get, but we will take anybody. But we look at this as a very long-term project, as a way of really beginning to build up Catholics throughout the state who really do understand what the political process is all about, understand the issues of the church, and hopefully someday run for office. I mean, it's a way to sort of begin building our own little army, if you will. Reading today was about David and Goliath, so we're still David, but we're up against Goliath, so we've got to do everything we can to be smart about that. So those are some of the ways that we're organizing out there and getting the word out to people. And then finally, has anybody here ever been to Lobby Night? Usually on President's Day in Annapolis? So that's another great opportunity to come and be involved in the political process. We're doing something very different this year on Lobby Night. We've had it over 30 years on President's Day, usually the Monday night when people are off. But in reality, that is their people's day off also. So we're trying it this year on a weeknight. And part of the reason for that is we gather hundreds of people. It's usually one of the best attended advocacy days of all the groups that come down to Annapolis. But we don't have any one place to put everybody where we can be seen and it can be a witness that, my goodness, all the Catholics are down here tonight. Because we can't use the big reception rooms on Monday nights. So we've moved it to a weeknight. And it's this year going to be actually Mardi Gras, Tuesday, February 9th. I didn't bring Lobby Night flyers, but I'll email you one, maybe you can put them in the bulletin. And we've changed the format significantly. We used to do briefings And then people would sit and kind of decide what they're going to say to their legislators, and they go and make appointments with their legislators and meet with them. It was, I think, a little bit intimidating, quite honestly, for a lot of people. I think people felt like they weren't that familiar with the issues, and what am I going to do if my legislator asks me a question and I can't answer it? And as much as we tried to convince everybody, you don't have to be an expert, just the fact that you're here and say, vote for or against this is all you really need to do. I think it was intimidating. So we kind of relaxed the approach a little bit. We'll still have briefings for everybody on 3 main issues at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at St. John Newman Parish. Then we'll shuttle people down at 5 o'clock, and we've just told all the legislators they're coming at 5. So get ready, and whether they're there or not, we'll have a handout for people to give the legislators a note, something to certainly sign and say that you were here so they can see that their constituents came to visit them. And a few points for people to make about just about 3 issues we'll talk about. And then we're going to have a reception at 6 o'clock in the Miller office building. Our bishops will be there, hopefully other leaders of Catholic Charities, people from our board, other Catholic institutions, and just have a social with our legislators. We'll have little balloons so they can find Harford County or what have you, and have good food, maybe some beer and wine. Just a much more relaxed atmosphere. So, and we've also we're making clear to everybody, if you can't get there at 3 o'clock, if you can get there at 5 o'clock, great. If you can only get there at 6, come anyway. Just come to the reception. That's all that you can do. And it's kind of, I think, will give everybody the first taste of being in Annapolis. So that's another great way to get involved. Another thing to spread the word about to people who might be interested in what we're doing. And we really love to get the word out about that. So that's kind of some of the practical things about the conference and so on. As far as the vision of what we do is concerned, every time I talk about what we do, I really try to stress how incredibly nonpartisan the church is. We are so not Democrat or Republican. We are so not liberal or conservative. If you're conservative, you probably think we're too liberal. If you're liberal, you probably think we're too conservative. Because the issues that we deal with, if you look at them from a political lens, fall into very, very different camps. It's really, we are very confusing, I think, to politicians, because you're like, you guys support repealing the death penalty and you're against abortion? That's a Republican-Democrat thing. How is that you can be so different politically than any other group we've been involved in. And I think it really causes us to think long and hard about what is it that is inspiring the church to take a position on all of these various issues. What is it that we're all about in the first place that would make us be a pro-life organization literally from birth till the end, till the day of your dying breath, and every single life in between, down to the convicted killer on death row. How can the church be that pro-life? What is it? How can the church think of the most difficult issue we probably dealt with, be against gay marriage, and yet for illegal immigrants? Where is that vision coming from? What puts this all together as far as the church and politics is concerned? And I think that's where this year of mercy and Pope Francis has been so incredibly helpful to us in kind of helping to get across what it is that we're all about. And it comes down to the understanding that it's just an understanding of the inherent value of every single human person who's ever walked this earth. That every single life is of value, and every single life deserves to be defended, deserves to be protected, deserves to be loved and embraced. And trying to weave that into our politics is a very challenging thing to do. It's a very strange approach in a certain way, I think, to the political world. And it's the beauty of the church's advocacy that we are so consistent about that vision. I'm sure you all followed the Pope's visit very carefully in the United States, and I was hanging on every word, of course, when he was speaking to Congress. I was like, okay, give us some good quotes, things we can use in testimony. But it was just, for me, living this life, to have the first time ever Pope addressing a political body like that, was just, I was just so enthralled with listening to what he had to say. I think there was one particular line I wanted to share with you. When he was talking to Congress, and he was saying to the legislators, and I have to find this in my notes. I take copious notes and then never look at them when I'm talking. Here it is. But he said, he was telling the legislators, trying to tell them to work together and so on. But he said, the mission of the legislator is to protect by means of the law the image and likeness fashioned by God on every human face. That's just a really beautiful statement that the Pope had for us. So, if you keep in mind that vision of the beauty of humanity and our obligation to represent them, I think it makes it a lot easier to begin to understand where the church is coming from on these issues. But I think it really challenges us in our everyday, day-to-day lives, which are inundated by the secular media and by other influences, by CNN and Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and who's someone on the opposite side. I don't watch a lot of that kind of TV, actually. But, our opinions are so vulnerable to the rest of the world out there, trying to put us into a camp, trying to say, you gotta be this way or you gotta be that way. And, trying to let the church through, let the voice of the church through all of that noise, to be able to hear what the church is saying to us is incredibly challenging. And it's incredibly challenging for us in our work, not simply with the legislators, but even with our own faithful Catholics. Just, we get, lots of mad email all the time from people. We literally said this, should we send this to everybody or just send it to these people? Because we know, no matter what the issue is, it's very difficult to try to help people within our own church understand where we're coming from on these issues. And I think that's what we're always asking everybody, and that's why I think this online email network is so important, is at least hear the church out. At least if it's an issue you really don't agree with because of whatever reason, at least try to see where the church is coming from and why is it that the church is taking this position on a particular issue, and pray about it. Try to think of this from the perspective of the gospel and from what Jesus came to do when he walked the face of the earth. And he made a lot of people mad, I think, but he was always so forgiving. He was always so merciful to people who were outcast, to people who weren't loved by society. And that's what we're trying to bring before the legislature in public policy. I think it's also, I think Pope Francis has been very helpful to us in this regard. And I will just be perfectly frank, coming out of the whole marriage issue that we just dealt with in Maryland, a lot of people hated us on that issue. And I'm very sympathetic to, that sense. It was a very personal, difficult issue for a lot of people. If you have a gay member of your family, if you're gay, it's very difficult to accept the church's teaching on gay marriage, and we really understand that. And that is why it's so important for us that on some of these really tough issues, on some of these really difficult issues, we have to bring them with the voice of love. We have to bring them in a witnessing way that does not in any way belie what Jesus came to say to the earth. Because he was able to do that. He was able to turn to people who he wasn't saying you were right or you were wrong, but I still love you. And he was able to really transform people's lives that way. And that's the kind of witness that we're trying to bring before our legislators and before the public square. So we work really, really hard with our advocates, and when we bring people to Lobby Night and so on, to really work on our tone, to work on the way that we say things. When we come down to talk about abortion, We can't come down there wagging our fingers at people and saying you're all terrible people. And the reality is that this state is dreadful when it comes to how permissive our abortion laws are, and how incredibly difficult it is to try to get the least little thing through politically. But we're not going to be listened to if we can't come down and be people who are genuinely merciful and loving and kind in our witness as we talk about difficult issues with our legislators. We'll just be dismissed, and we won't have really done justice to our message if our manner in which we advocate isn't reflective of who we are as Catholics and as Christians and as believers in Jesus. So that's something that's a big part of trying to convey our message to legislators. One of the ways that we are trying, a couple ways we're trying to do this, is just reminding the legislature and the public in general of all of the good work the church does. Because outside of politics, I mean, I bet every single person in this room probably volunteers in some wonderful way to do some wonderful thing, or gives your money, or is so involved in taking care of the poor. I mean, our church is the largest social service provider in the state, outside, and probably in the country, outside of the state itself. I mean, we're the ones out there taking care of people in need. We're the ones out there reaching out and really showing that love to our fellow human beings. And it's so important to remind people about that. I really don't think that people understand how much the church does. So one thing we do once a week is we email a newsletter to the legislators, just a short little article that our communications director does a beautiful job on, called Because We're Catholic. You probably have heard the phrase before. We don't do this because they are Catholic, we do this because we are Catholic. I think Cardinal Hickey may have been the originator of that phrase. And so we just do a story, just a feel-good story about something wonderful the church is doing every week. And it's just a really lovely way to share. We also share that with our email network as well every week. Another thing that we've done, you can go online and check for District 7, is we've put together what we call a Catholic footprint for every legislative district in the state. Massive undertaking. It took a lot of heart. The staff is really wonderful in stepping up to this. But it's just a little fold-over pamphlet of all the ministries in each district. So all the parishes, all the schools, all the soup kitchens, all the hospitals, all the various ways. I mean, I'm sure we're only touching the tip of the iceberg. And we just delivered those yesterday to all the legislators to share with them. So, and that's kind of the materials that we're sharing with our district captains to say, just invite your legislators to your potluck dinner and just get to know how wonderful these people here are in this room, because we really are very good people, even though we have a tough message sometimes. So I think that's been another way to kind of get across the vision of who we are and what we do in terms of what's going behind all these issues. So, with that said, I'm going to jump into the issues that are before us coming up, and I'll try to sort of weave back what I was saying about why we're involved in these issues. The first issue I wanted to mention, we have a Q&A in the back there as well about this, and this is one that is a very, very urgent issue and a very alarming issue, I think. And this is the bill that would legalize physician-assisted suicide. Has everybody heard about this issue? Are you all aware that this is going on? It was introduced for the first time last year. It's coming back with a vengeance again this year. We were able to fight it off last year, but it was actually a very, very close vote. And it's an interesting issue in that it's really not a very partisan issue. It doesn't really fall into, most Republicans are against it, but there are a lot of, particularly African American Democrats, who are very opposed to the bill as well. And it's such an incredibly personal issue. So I just want to explain first what the bill actually does, and then what we're doing about getting our arguments out against the bill. The bill, as it's been written, everywhere it's been introduced, and the few places where it's actually passed, there's only 5 states where it's legal, it would say that if you have been given a diagnosis of 6 months or less to live, if a doctor says that to you, and that's confirmed by another doctor, you may request from your attending physician a lethal prescription. The lethal prescription itself is usually 90 pills that you just go and pick up at your local pharmacy. The bill does not require that you be screened for depression. It says you simply have to be mentally competent to do this, and that there's nothing impairing your judgment. There's no requirement that you notify anybody in your family that you are deciding to do this. Your request has to be witnessed by 2 people, only one of whom can't be a potential recipient of your inheritance. The other one can. And there's another thing I want to say about it. Very, very few safeguards in the bill. We're extremely worried about the bill, obviously, for moral reasons, we don't think it's right to take your own life. We think only God can take our lives. But we're actually finding that if we argue along those terms, we're really not very successful. I think people will just dismiss that argument as well. That's what you believe, but that's your own religious faith, and people ought to be able to make their own choices, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to. But what we find has been very, very effective in arguing against the bill is taking apart the possible impact that this would have on vulnerable populations. It's kind of like, let's just think this through here. So we've put together a coalition, very simply called Maryland Against Physician-Assisted Suicide, of a lot of, secular is probably not the right word, but not necessarily religious partners, most especially disability, advocates for people with disabilities who are terrified of this bill. Because advocates for people with disabilities will say, I am already very vulnerable in the medical profession. I already face the fact all the time that people think it's probably not worth your doing this because your life isn't really worth living, or you don't have much of a quality of life anyway. So why go ahead and get this organ transplant? Why go ahead and get this treatment? I would never want to live like you. I mean, literally you will hear these phrases coming from the advocates for the bill. I would never want to be dependent on other people. I would never want to be a burden to other people. And people in the room who've lived their lives with these kinds of disabilities are listening to this saying, if this were legal, aren't people going to start coming to me and saying, why are you costing us all this money? Why are you, you have this option. Why go on? Don't you think that this would be a better choice for you? Likewise with the frail elderly. I mean, the lawyers for against elder abuse, will talk about how incredibly common it is for elderly people not necessarily to be physically abused, but just to be sort of taken over by somebody in the family who's completely influenced them and talk them into doing all kinds of things. And to think that this is not going to happen in the medical community, or within people's families, is just to be very, very naive. And there will be no witness. The problem with the bill is once the doctor gives you this prescription, there's no oversight after that. That's it. We'll never know whether you took it or not, and there's no witness at the point that you actually take the medication. So there's no telling whether somebody was, pressured into doing this. And like I said,